If I'd known that day would flip my life upside down, I might have done things differently. Maybe I wouldn't have taken the shortcut through the alley. Maybe I wouldn't have picked up those keys. But life doesn't give you a warning, it just happens. I live in London, in one of those old brick flats where the plumbing creaks louder than the neighbors. My days are predictable: work, home, sleep, repeat. Boring, sure, but safe. At least it used to feel that way. It started on a cold November evening. The kind where the air feels like it's biting your face and the city smells like wet pavement and burnt coffee. I was walking back from work, headphones in, when I spotted them, a set of keys. They were lying in the middle of the alley I always cut through, shiny, almost new. It wasn't the kind of place you'd expect someone to drop something so important. Most people don't even stop here. It's narrow, dimly lit, with graffiti that's more unsettling than artistic. I bent down to pick them up. There was a tag attached, a plain black rectangle with an address etched into the surface. No name, just an address about 2 streets over from my flat. I hesitated. What kind of person just leaves their keys in an alley? It felt wrong, but I told myself it was probably just an accident. Someone hurrying, keys slipping from their pocket, that's what I wanted to believe, anyway. I slipped the keys into my coat pocket and decided I'd drop them off on my way home. No big deal, right? Just a good deed for the day. But when I got to the address, the building didn't look like someone lived there. It was one of those old Victorian houses, the kind that's been chopped into flats or left to rot. The windows were dark and the air around it felt heavy. I walked up the steps, clutching the keys in my hand. My heart was pounding for no reason I could explain. There was no doorbell, just a rusted brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. I knocked twice, the sound echoing in the empty street. No one answered. I knocked again, louder this time, still nothing. I almost left the keys on the doorstep and walked away, but something stopped me. A sound. It was faint, coming from inside the house. A creak, like someone was walking across the floor. "Hello," I called out. My voice sounded small against the cold air. Nothing. I should have left. I know that now, but curiosity is a funny thing. It makes you ignore every red flag. I tried the keys in the door just to see if they fit. And they did. When the lock clicked, my stomach flipped. I don't know why, but I pushed the door open. The hallway was dark, and the air smelled damp, like old wood and mildew. My phone flashlight barely made a dent in the shadows. "Hello," I called again, stepping inside. The floor creaked under my weight. No one answered. But as I moved deeper into the house, I noticed something odd. The sound I'd heard earlier, it wasn't footsteps. It was something else, a faint tapping, like nails on wood. I followed it, my heart racing with every step, and then I saw it. At the end of the hallway, on the floor, was a single photograph. I bent down to pick it up, my hands trembling. It was a picture of me, taken earlier that day, walking through the alley. My blood turned to ice. The photograph was unmistakable. It was me, walking through the alley just hours ago. Same coat, same scarf, even the way my hair was tied back. Someone had been watching me. The tapping sound echoed again, snapping me out of my trance. It was coming from upstairs now, faint but deliberate, like someone wanted me to follow. My instincts screamed to leave, to throw the keys and run back to the safety of my flat. But I didn't. I crept up the staircase, the wood groaning beneath my feet. The air felt colder with every step, and my flashlight barely illuminated the narrow corridor at the top. The tapping had stopped, replaced by a thick, unnerving silence. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. That's when I noticed the door at the end of the hall. It was slightly ajar, just enough for me to see a sliver of light spilling out. I moved toward it slowly, the photograph still clutched in my hand. When I pushed the door open, the first thing I noticed was the smell. It was faint but sharp, like something metallic, blood. The room was small, barely furnished, with peeling wallpaper and a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. And in the center of the room was a table. On the table sat a second photograph. I hesitated before picking it up, my stomach churning. This one was worse. It wasn't just me in the picture, it was me inside this very house. Standing in the hallway, looking at the front door. My heart pounded in my chest. This couldn't be real. It was impossible. Whoever had taken this picture, they were here. I spun around, shining my flashlight into the corners of the room. Nothing, just shadows that seemed too deep, too alive. And then I saw it. Scratched into the wall, just above the table, were 3 words, KEP looking, Lena. My breath caught in my throat. They knew my name. I stumbled backward, slamming into the wall. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. How could they know me? How did they know I'd come here? I turned and bolted for the stairs, every instinct screaming at me to get out, but as I reached the top step, I froze. The front door, the one I'd left wide open, was now closed. I crept down slowly, gripping the railing for support. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the flashlight. When I reached the door, I grabbed the handle and pulled. It wouldn't budge. No, I whispered, yanking harder. The door didn't move an inch. It was locked. And then, from somewhere behind me, I heard it again, the tapping. It wasn't faint this time. It was loud and deliberate, coming from the hallway upstairs. I spun around, shining the flashlight toward the staircase. A figure stood at the top. They were completely still, their face obscured by the shadows. But there was no mistaking the shape of them, a person, standing in the exact spot I'd been in the second photograph. I didn't wait to see what they would do. I ran. I ran blindly, not caring where I was going. All I knew was I needed to get away from whoever or whatever was standing at the top of those stairs. The hallway blurred as I sprinted back toward the kitchen, hoping to find another exit. But every door I tried was locked, the windows boarded shut. Panic clawed at my chest as I fumbled with my phone, desperate to call someone, anyone. But when I unlocked it, my stomach dropped. The screen was frozen. A single message filled the display. White text on a black background. You shouldn't have come here. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. That's when I heard it again, the tapping. This time it was right behind me. I turned slowly, flashlight trembling in my hand. The beam caught the edges of the dim kitchen, rusted appliances, peeling wallpaper, and shadows pooling in the corners. No one was there. And then, from the corner of my eye, I noticed something, a small door. It was tucked beneath the staircase, partially hidden behind an old, tattered curtain. I hadn't seen it before. The tapping sound came again, louder this time, echoing from behind the door. I should have walked away. I should have kept looking for a way out. But something about the door, it felt like an invitation. My fingers brushed against the handle, cold and slick with condensation. Slowly, I pulled it open. Inside was a staircase leading down into the basement. The smell hit me immediately, damp, musty, and faintly metallic like rust and old pipes. The tapping had stopped, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. I shone my flashlight down the steps, the beam revealing the edges of a concrete floor below. "Hello?" My voice sounded small and weak. No answer. I took a deep breath and started down, my steps slow and deliberate. The wooden stairs creaked under my weight, each one sounding like a warning. At the bottom, the basement stretched out in front of me, a cold, empty space lit by a single, flickering bulb. But it wasn't empty. In the middle of the room was a chair, and sitting on the chair was another photograph. I approached cautiously, every instinct screaming at me to turn around and run. The photo showed a man, tied to the very chair in front of me. His head was slumped forward, his face obscured by shadows. But what made my blood run cold wasn't the man, it was the background. The photo had been taken right here in this basement. The air around me felt heavier, thicker, like the walls were closing in. I turned in a slow circle, flashlight sweeping across the room. That's when I saw it, another door. It was steel, rusted and heavy, with scratches marring its surface. Something or someone had been trying to get out. I didn't want to open it. Every nerve in my body screamed not to. But I knew that if I left now, I'd never stop wondering what was behind it. The keys. I reached into my pocket and pulled them out, my hands trembling. One of them had to fit. I tried the first key. Nothing. The second. Nothing. The third clicked. My heart felt like it was about to explode as I gripped the handle and pulled the door open. Inside, the room was pitch black. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness, illuminating a space smaller than I expected. And then I saw them. Eyes, dozens of them. They reflected the light back at me, and blinking, watching, I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet. The flashlight clattered to the ground, its beam spinning wildly around the room. And that's when I realized they weren't eyes at all. They were cameras. The walls, the ceiling, every surface was covered in cameras, all of them pointed directly at the center of the room, where the chair sat, and on the floor beneath the chair was a pool of something dark. My head spun as I pieced it together. This wasn't just some abandoned house, it was a trap, a setup. And I was in the middle of it. I couldn't breathe. The walls glared back at me, covered in those silent, watching cameras. It wasn't just the chair in the center of the room, it was the whole space. This wasn't a basement, it was a stage. Every instinct told me to leave, to get out of that house and never look back. But my legs felt like they were rooted to the floor. The dark pool beneath the chair shimmered faintly in the flickering light, its meaning clear. Someone had been here. Recently, I snatched my flashlight from the floor and shone it around the room, desperate for any explanation. That's when I noticed the wires. They snaked across the floor and up the walls, feeding into the cameras, looping around the ceiling. My beam followed them to a small metal box mounted in the corner of the room. A control panel. I moved toward it, my footsteps hesitant. The box was open, its contents blinking faintly. A screen sat in the middle, covered in smudges. I wiped it clean and froze. The screen was playing a live feed. It showed the hallway upstairs, and standing in that hallway was me. Not a recording, not a still image. Me, right now, in the exact clothes I was wearing, holding the flashlight. I staggered backward, my heart racing. It wasn't possible. How could I be there when I was here? And then the screen flickered. The figure I'd seen earlier, the one standing at the top of the stairs, was now on the screen. Their back was to the camera, but something about the way they stood sent a chill down my spine. They weren't alone. Another figure stepped into the frame, their face obscured by a hood. They turned slowly, as if looking directly at the camera, directly at me. I turned off the screen, my hands trembling. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. A faint sound echoed from the doorway behind me. A creak. I spun around, flashlight aimed at the entrance to the room. My beam caught the edge of the steel door I'd unlocked earlier. It was open just a crack, swinging ever so slightly on its hinges, and then I saw it. On the floor, just outside the door, was another photograph. I stepped forward cautiously, my heart hammering in my chest. The photo was smeared with something dark ink, or maybe something worse. I held it up to the light and felt my stomach lurch. It was the chair in the center of the room. Empty, except for a single word scrawled on the seat in red: "Run." I didn't think, I just ran. Up the stairs, through the hallway, past the door that somehow still wouldn't open. My flashlight barely kept up as I bolted back into the kitchen. "Please," I whispered, yanking on the back door. Locked. Every exit was locked. The sound of footsteps echoed from upstairs. Slow, deliberate, they weren't in a rush. I dove into a pantry near the back of the kitchen, slamming the door shut behind me. The air was thick and stifling, filled with the faint scent of mothballs and dust. Through the thin wooden slats, I could see the edge of the kitchen. My flashlight was off, and I tried to steady my breathing as the footsteps grew louder. They reached the kitchen. A shadow stretched across the floor, tall and angular. I bit down on my lip, willing myself not to make a sound. The figure moved slowly, their footsteps heavy against the tiles. And then they stopped right in front of the pantry door. I held my breath, my heart pounding so loudly I thought they might hear it. The shadow didn't move, and then a voice. Low, soft, and impossibly close. "You shouldn't have opened the door." The pantry light flickered, and everything went black. When the light went out, everything disappeared: my breath, my thoughts, even time itself. I couldn't see anything, couldn't move. All I could do was feel the overwhelming darkness pressing in on me, suffocating. And then the pantry door creaked open. For a split second I considered running, but there was nowhere to go. I braced myself, expecting to come face to face with the shadow I'd seen in the kitchen. But the figure wasn't there. The doorway was empty. I stepped out cautiously, my flashlight trembling in my hand as I clicked it back on. The beam cut through the darkness, landing on the walls, the countertops, the cold, empty floor. The house was silent again, until I heard a sound. It wasn't the tapping this time, or even the footsteps. It was a voice. Soft, faint, and echoing from somewhere deep within the house. It was saying my name, Lena. I froze, the flashlight shaking as I swept it across the kitchen. The voice was coming from the basement. The smart thing to do would have been to leave, to stop trying to make sense of any of it. But I couldn't. Something was pulling me back. I made my way to the basement door, my pulse hammering in my chest. It felt heavier this time, as if the air itself was holding me back. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, the scene was exactly how I'd left it. The chair sat in the middle of the room, the cameras still staring down from the walls. But now, there was something else, another photograph. It was taped to the back of the chair, perfectly placed for me to find. I peeled it off, my hands shaking. The picture showed the steel door I'd opened earlier, the one with the cameras inside. But now, the cameras weren't empty. The photos showed the images they were recording. Dozens of people, strangers, all of them tied to chairs just like the one in the basement. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with terror. And in the corner of the photo was a timestamp. It wasn't from the past, it was from the future. Tomorrow night, 10 p.m. I dropped the photo, my breath coming in short gasps. This wasn't just a trap, it was a plan, and I was part of it. The voice called my name again, louder this time. I spun around, flashlight aimed at the far wall. That's when I saw the figure again. They were standing just inside the steel door, barely visible in the dim light. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "What do you want from me?" The figure didn't answer. Instead, they stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. And then I saw their face. It was mine. No, it wasn't just mine. It was me. Same coat, same scarf, same wide-eyed expression of terror. "You should have stayed away," they said, their voice identical to mine. I stumbled back, my head spinning. This isn't real. This can't be real." "You opened the door," they said, their voice cold and steady. "Now it's your turn." The figure moved closer, and I couldn't look away. The cameras on the walls whirred to life, their red lights blinking in unison, and then the basement changed. The walls shifted, the cameras vanished, and the room became something else entirely. A white, sterile space, like a hospital or a lab. The chair was gone, replaced by a table covered in tools, scalpels, wires, things I didn't want to name. I was no longer alone. The room was filled with people now, their faces hidden behind masks. They didn't speak, didn't acknowledge me. But I could feel them watching, and then the voice came again. Not from me, not from the figure, but from the air itself. "Welcome to the experiment, Lena. Your part begins now." I don't remember what happened after that. When I woke up, I was back in the alley where I'd found the keys. It was morning, the sunlight almost blinding. In my hand was another photograph. It showed me standing in the alley, looking at the camera with the same terrified expression I'd seen in the basement. On the back, written in that same blocky handwriting, were 3 words, "You're next."